Welcome everyone to today's Fightback Session. I'm Lily, I'm the coordinator of this series, and I'm with FoundersLane, the founders-driven corporate venture builder. And while everybody is still dropping in, let me tell you a couple of words about who we are and the mission that we're on here with this live event series. So at FoundersLane, we approach today's challenges with results-driven action to co-create a better world. And Fightback is kind of the word that we coined in this context, because in these present times of massive business disruption, we want to contribute by hosting these free trusted spaces to equip our business leaders and their companies with actionable insights and advice to not only survive, but really thrive in this digital economy ahead. And in today's session, I'm super excited. We'll explore designing circular economy into new ventures. I'll be in the chat monitoring your questions you have for the speakers. And let me tell you a couple of words about your hosts today. So we have Adam and Frank here. These are FoundersLane's head of the climate vertical and impact venture building. Welcome, Adam and Frank. I'll head over in a minute. And we're also super happy to announce that we're having a very special guest here today. It's Attila Turos, a true veteran in circular economy venture building and a former lead of a World Economic Forum circular economy program. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insight and expertise.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you very much. Frank, the stage is yours.
Okay, great. So welcome everybody also from my side. Thank you for joining this session on designing circular economic principles into venture building. As for the agenda for today, I'll first give you a quick introduction of what FoundersLane actually is, how we work, and why we have such a strong focus on climate, and in particular on circular economy within that. Now, my colleague Adam will then continue to explain the concept of circularity, and we'll provide you with some examples as well. And then we also have very happy to have you here on board, of course, Attila. And this is going to be a series, actually, of 3 webinars on circular economy. So if at the end of this webinar you liked and heard what you saw, then stay tuned for the next ones to come as well. All right. Now, I don't really want to spend too much time on us, rather dive into the content of what we actually do, but maybe very high level. We don't just have a passion for circularity. We've been working on circular ventures in the past, present, and will be doing so in the future. From working with the World Economic Forum Circular Economic Program to European energy companies to construction sector. Now, with direct experience in it, we see vast opportunities in this space, and in particular in relation to corporate venture building. So starting off with a brief intro into FoundersLane, we're the leading independent corporate venture builder of Europe. We build new startups together with corporates by using an unfair advantage that corporates have. We create new, fast-growing digital businesses in categories most important for humanity right now. Therefore, it is that we've focused on climate and health. In climate, we build low-carbon and regenerative new businesses that are transforming society. We have more than 200 people that are working with us on ventures, and our 3 founders, all entrepreneurs, bring extensive experience in investing, venture building, and board membership participation, as well as setting up entrepreneurial operating models. We've worked so far with over 30 selected corporate partners from the more than a century-old state-owned company Vattenfall to corporates in packaging, financing, and health. We have a particular focus on digital ventures and platform economics, and we argue that platforms can actually be some sorts of enablers of sustainable progress, such as a move towards working with renewables and in a more efficient way. We have a head office that is in Berlin, an in-house tech team in Cologne, and we have an office in London where Adam usually works during non-corona times. Now, we argue that corporates often lack the speed and entrepreneurial mindset to create digital businesses with the envisioned ecosystem impact. Therefore, we see corporate venture building as a new asset class that enables corporates to build enterprise value and impact much faster with less risk, and it creates an unfair advantage. That unfair advantage might be customers, knowledge, company assets in terms of fabrics, financial resources, or their network. Now, once we have identified these corporate venture building opportunities, we test them in the market, we pivot, we adjust, and we start building and scaling the most impactful one. And in addition, it needs to be a solution that is in line with our corporate partner's strategy in order to secure its long-term existence. So corporate venture building's objectives, in a nutshell, is to increase enterprise value and deliver quantifiable impact to a corporate and the larger society by building new, fast, digital businesses. Next one, Adam. This model delivers direct advantages by combining the agility of entrepreneurs and the asset strengths of corporates. At FoundersLane, we have a very multidisciplinary team that is also entrepreneurial, from ex-consultants to experienced founders and tech entrepreneurs and researchers. This mix, our experience, as well as the setup, makes us different. But more so, we aim to get a share out of the new to established ventures that we build. So we share basically risk and reward. And we want to contribute towards building a better world, no matter how cheesy it might sound, because it's more important now than ever before. Now, when starting ventures, we have three ways of working, our products, if you like. One is our white space garage that covers systemic market analysis for the corporate in all operating markets and detailing and specifying new digital businesses, staffing, venture trajectories, etc., by constant validation. Our white space garage aims to understand the developments and dynamics in the market and find new opportunities, for example, in the space of circular economy, in particular industry, or several interlinking industries for that matter. Our entrepreneurial operating model is a governing body we install that enables seamless funding and the interaction between the corporate and entrepreneurs. And our third and last product or way of working is venture building itself. Obviously, as I'm very passionate about it, I think this is the most exciting one. Thereby, we actually execute ventures through de-risking process, followed by scaling the venture to maximize portfolio enterprise value. Now, as mentioned, within FoundersLane, we are dedicated to bringing impact. It is our Climate Vertical's mission to co-create new ventures that provide economic, societal, and environmental value. We argue there is a need for new sustainable growth with climate venture building that looks way beyond economic value alone. So let's start with the obvious. Can we? Yeah, thanks. Today's massive problem, the urgency that we all have, and the reason why we as Climate Vertical exists. It is indeed true that humanity has achieved great progress, in particular in the last decades. Millions have been lifted out of poverty, child mortality rates have gone down, and we now live much longer than before. Yet, when it comes to our environment, we are still working with a linear model that is based on a take, make, and dispose. One that cannot physically go on forever. Our environment is degrading, deforestation is through the roof, fish stocks are plummeting, and temperatures are rising, as you can see in all these charts on the slide. This model is increasingly unsustainable, with drastic economic, societal, and environmental consequences. So it is therefore, for the first time ever, that all the long-term risks by likelihood from the World Economic Forum are environmental. The near-term impacts of climate change add up to a planetary emergency that will include loss of life, social and geopolitical tensions, and negative economic impacts. So we as a vertical are therefore working on the mother of all problems, improving the state of the planet and helping corporates to transition towards more renewable business models that are both profitable and sustainable. That is why we need concepts like circularity. And that is why they need to be executed across all sectors. Now, in the last decade in particular, we have seen a shift in the proportion of companies that focused on tracking and reporting environmental, social, and governance metrics to move towards businesses that look at creating societal value and not just shareholder value. They have started to take their responsibility. They're actually moving beyond shareholder capitalism. They've set themselves goals, for example, carbon reduction goals. These goals have actually accelerated really within the last year. Yet it is one thing to make this goal, it is quite another to actually achieve them. So that is where we can come in. With climate, we see a major trend that is leading us towards system change. Can we go to the next one? That includes changes in value chain and supply chain, improving logistics, productivity, efficiency, transparency, asset-free models, so that's marketplaces as enablers of sustainable transformation. The sharing economy, of course, from property and inefficiency in use towards sharing and optimization, and moving towards renewables, energy and material use that is regenerative. Sustainable consumption, and last but not least, also circularity, the focus of this webinar. Now, we use entrepreneurship and new business models to create a lasting impact, and we do that by enabling ecosystems and network effects to confront interdependent challenges, by using business model innovation, solutions beyond the standard linear business models, and by applying technology with a cause or with a purpose, if you like. AI, data management, IoT. We have done this, for example, with our venture Solidic, which today, after 2.5 years after starting, is the fastest growing PV analytics marketplace worldwide, with more than 100,000 PV solar plants connected. We have proprietary toolkits, frameworks, and capabilities in-house. We developed, for example, the platform Innovation Kits. You can look it up and download it on the app online as well. There is also an app, actually. We are currently developing the platform Impact Kit, aimed at looking beyond economics. We have circular design kits, a short version of it. Adam will show you after 3 more slides, I think. We publish articles on circularity, venture building, impact frameworks, and other relevant topics. And as mentioned, we have an impact tech team. So let it then be obvious that we need to ditch this take, make, and dispose model and move towards basically taking less, making more, and stop disposing. In the circular economy, what matters is to rethink waste streams. They're not waste. They're a resource. The only thing that needs to go in the waste bin is the idea that we need to look at stuff as if it is waste. We need to rethink business models. Circularity does not add cost. It creates opportunity and unlocks new value. We need to get rid of the misconception that circularity adds cost. Exactly the opposite proves the case, as we have also shown with ventures we have worked on. Circularity actually unlocks new value by increasing customer preference and generates superior margins. We therefore talk about circular value loops. Now, the circular economy is a $1 trillion industry by 2025 and expected to grow to $4.5 trillion in the next 10 years thereafter. There's tremendous political momentum as well. The European Commission, for example, outlines its ambitions on circularity in the European Green Deal. True, you can argue and debate whether it's already concrete enough, but we can't argue with the fact that there is actually great interest in the topic and progress being made. The European Commission said that going fully circular is the only way forward, not just for the planet, but also for business. So applying circular economic principles can, for example, increase the EU's GDP and create around 700,000 new jobs in 10 years from now. But then, did we as FoundersLane not pay any attention to the news? Did we not see that Corona is changing everything around us? People are currently using more plastics, actually, than I think maybe even ever before. With all the takeaway purchases, reusable bags today, as like the disposable bags today, as the reusable bags are seen as scary since it might perhaps contain viruses. We actually argue that Corona, the black swan here, might be an accelerator of current momentum. Today, with nations isolating themselves, supply chains disrupted, and they have been very squeezed, of course, before. Even of important medical equipment, it suddenly really matters, it tremendously matters actually, where you get your food and your products from. The same accounts also for waste. How much we actually use and we actually dispose is becoming very visible if we're no longer to just ship it out of sight. Now, and also the black swan of Corona can point cash-strapped small, medium-sized enterprises or even corporates, again, to the business opportunities. Do more with less. Digitize. Don't fly out too often. Same accounts also for, it's basically to unlock new value in short. So disruption is really taking place. The disruption to produce, store, consume, waste management, all these are accelerating. As nations want to increasingly rely on their own abilities to produce, distribute, recycle, or discharge. Now, there are several ways how COVID-19 can impact the environment in general. And on that topic, it's actually a topic on its own. I recently posted an article about it. If you're interested, you can read. But I am hopeful that there are ample, and there is actually ample of reasons to be hopeful, that the current pause we're experiencing with Corona, with clean air and pollution levels down, can actually be an advantage if we decide it should be. So Adam, I have decided it should be. Explain me now, please, how I get that done. Show me the way.
Great. Well, thanks, Frank. All right. Well, I'm first going to start by providing an introduction to at least our understanding of the circular economy. I know a lot of people on this webinar, having spoken before, actually know quite a lot about it, and others are very new to the concept. So the aim of this presentation is sort of finding a way to explain it without being too confusing, and also without being too boring to people who are already very familiar with the topic. So to build on what Frank said, we are actually currently facing quite a large man-made global crisis. We're hearing more and more about man-made climate change due to the activities that we're undertaking across different industries. We're seeing more and more stories about waste overspills into our natural environments, whether it's the oceans or also into our forests, etc. We're seeing more and more build-ups of environmental hazards, whether this is pollution in the streets causing health problems, and we're also getting resource depletion, whether it's raw materials, water in specific aquifers and lakes, and all of these are leading to significant societal, environmental, and also economic problems. Why all of these problems? Well, this oversimplified picture of a supply chain is why. It flows from one way to another and isn't regenerative. It doesn't really loop. It's just incredibly linear. And this is the basic architecture of our current value chains at the moment. At the moment, we see, to add a bit more color, there's actually waste at every single sector, every single stage, every single node of the value chain. And this is something that, all this waste is not going back into the system. So we're essentially seeing a lot of material being taken out and nothing being put back in. when we think of waste here at FoundersLane, we don't really think of waste just as the byproduct or the sort of trash that we typically associate waste with. For us, we look at waste across multiple dimensions. So starting with the physical waste, we have sort of the byproduct emissions, packaging, unsold goods, and all of this is anything that you can imagine that's physical, that gets thrown away, that doesn't get reused or anything like that. We have utilities waste. This is basically not optimizing the use of your different utilities, whether it's energy, water, sewage, even your networks, communications. And finally, one that people quite rarely think of as waste is asset waste. For us, this is basically kind of inefficient use of the assets that you hold, whether it's machinery, vehicles, equipment, space, even human capital. If you have employees who are working at 50% capacity, then that's a waste of people's intellect that could be used in other places. So we try to look at waste in quite a holistic way to try and look into different ways we can remove waste and find good solutions. When I typically talk about circular economy with people who are quite new to the concept, they tend to imagine a big circle of that value chain I showed earlier, kind of going completely around and waste feeding back in. It's actually a little bit more complex than that. And when you consider circular economy, I would call it more the arrow economy. And if you like arrows, you're going to love this presentation. But there's a huge amount of different activities that you can do across the value chain to add circularity. You can start off with just attitudes and behavior. As a manufacturer, as a supplier, as a user, you can prioritize the use of regenerative, sustainable products, whether it's regenerative extraction of raw materials, the sustainable production. Can you prioritize suppliers that have sustainable production? Can you prioritize greener distribution? And then as consumers or retailers, can you prioritize durable, reusable, etc. products? There's also changes in behavior at different stages. So for example, manufacturers can remanufacture, they can actually use waste as resources. Retailers can also kind of try and create internal loop cycles. Users can try and repair, refurbish, etc. Across all the different stages. At every single part of the supply chain, you should factor in the ability to actually repair, reuse, refurbish, remanufacture. How can you take waste and products and put them back in without going through an enormous sort of like recycling sort of process? We also have on the distribution side, can you optimize routes? Can you create reverse logistic networks? Can you share? Can you share equipment? Can you share space? Where can you optimize the use of your assets? And the whole aim of this is, can we reduce our dependency on raw materials and reduce disposal at all nodes? Going back to that initial slide I showed, that shows resource depletion and waste overspill, the whole aim of the circular economy is to just reduce that completely. And to Frank's point earlier, we see quite large environmental, societal sort of effects that will be associated with reducing our dependency on raw materials and reducing disposal. But we also see significant economic benefits too. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development very recently, actually a few weeks ago, published quite a nice report illustrating how to make the case to your CFO for implementing circular economy initiatives. And you can see at so many different stages within the P&L, from increasing revenue streams all the way through to reducing costs, that there's a very positive impact of circular economy within the economic status in companies. On a macro level, McKinsey did a report a few years ago showing that the opportunity in Europe alone is 1.8 trillion through cost reductions and resource efficiencies by moving towards a circular architecture. So we're not the first people to do work on circular economy. Obviously, we're building up on what a lot of people have done. I just wanted to share a few very interesting frameworks, and I recommend everyone who's watching this to look these up. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is probably the most famous think tank with doing fantastic work, creating frameworks and creating a huge amount of reports, and really sort of a network that brings some of the biggest players together to actually act and do stuff, and to innovate, to collaborate together. They came up with the Resolve framework. They also have ideation cards that show a few sort of tricks that you can do. But the resolve framework is very useful, showing a few sort of activities to make your business activities more circular. The 9 R's, some academics, Kirsch et al., they basically produced a framework showing sort of a scale of activities you can do from the more linear to the more circular. The more linear being the sort of more traditional recycling, recovery, just incineration, collecting the energy, extending the use of products through reusing, repairing, refurbishing, remanufacturing. But the sort of more innovative activities is you can refuse using unsustainable products. Rethink your products as well, your business models, and reduce the use of anything that's unsustainable. I'll just go through the others quite quickly. We have the CEO Guide to the Circular Economy. This was a collaboration between Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the World Business Council for Sustainability Development. And Circular Economy, a cool Amsterdam-based consultancy, have really pioneered I definitely recommend to look at some of the work that they've done, but they've really pioneered some thinking around the circular economy. And we've essentially taken an adaptation of all of these different models to put together our own way, our own sort of pathway of innovating and ideating around circular economy. So we have 4 sort of objectives that we like to have, starting with prioritization of regenerative resources. Then you have to prioritize efficient processes, design for durability and reusability, and can you use waste as resource? So these are 4 different objectives that you can do internally. And then we have sort of 4 tools, concepts, activities that you can do to help that. So one is rethink business models. Try and think away from that linear architecture. Collaborate within your ecosystem. You're more powerful if you work with others. Design for the future. Think about modularity, standardization. What is going to be the future? Could Apple have designed some plugs to actually be more forthcoming for future generation of products? And finally, unleash digital technology from the 4th Industrial Revolution, which allow a huge amount of opportunities. I'm going to try and go through these 8 points very quickly. If I go quite fast, I do apologize, but we would like to get to the designing circular ventures part. So prioritizing regenerative resources. If you look at the sort of simple value chain that we demonstrated earlier, the prioritization of regenerative resources is really as simple as, can you use raw materials from producers that extract in a regenerative manner? So, forestry companies that replant, agriculture that uses sort of more organic sort of methods, or, reuse materials that have already been used. Can you prioritize suppliers that use remanufactured, repurposed supplies? And can you also get, reused products or design products to be reused and go back into the value chain? So a great example of companies that have done very well in these areas are Adidas. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Parley, which is the upcycling of ocean plastics to actually produce a product that no longer has uses plastics made from biofuels. And also Futurecraft, which is a bio-nano material, which is being designed to be reused. Also in the automobile industry, Renault have invested quite extensively in creating a circular economy within the automobile industry, where they collect parts from cars and reintegrate them into new parts, new cars. They've been fantastic in the remanufacturing process. Prioritization of efficient processes is looking across your value chain at the physical, the utility, and the asset wastes that could be formed, and how can you change some behavior? How can you change some processes? Can you use equipment that have less byproduct? Could you create more sort of flexible unfinished goods, which rather than being disposed of, if you don't complete into finished goods, can be sold on, used somewhere else? Can you digitize processes? On the utilities, can you, for example, create more water use cycles? Can you, rather than using a liter of water once, can you use it 10 times? On the asset side, where do you have assets that are not being used that you could potentially share? Where do you have a neighboring collaborator or supplier that you could share their assets with too? So the prioritization of efficient processes is really where can you, create less waste and rely less on the materials that are flowing in. Design for durability, rather than on the operations, is more on the products sort of side. And it's essentially how can we put more durable products or services into the value chain. And this is not just about the durability of products, but reusability too. Can you create new business models that allow loop cycles? So traditional one on the durability side, Patagonia are famous for making very high quality, durable products. But then we also look at Adidas with their Future Craft. They've created a new bionet material that can be reused. Here, it's all about having a business model that encourages the user to return the shoe so that it can be remanufactured and put back into the system. Philips have also have light as a service, where rather than selling some light bulbs, they provide the light bulbs and recollect them and fix them, and they keep all the parts. It's cheaper for the user, and then Philips can recollect the parts and nothing goes to waste. Waste as a resource, it's essentially, can you find someone who's interested in my waste? Am I interested in their waste? Can I use this as a raw material? Can I plug this in? And the chances are, if you can find one company that's willing to use your waste as a as a resource, you're probably going to find a lot of other companies that are also interested in using your waste. And here is where you get the emergence of waste trading platforms. Quite a few companies have done this very successfully. We've got the first one, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, Schrott. It's a German company that is a trading platform for scrap metals. Rubicon became very famous as once calling themselves the Uber of waste. Now they provide a lot of software as a service to help companies optimize their waste and provide waste as a resource. Phoenix is a company that allows for unsold goods to be traded. Recycle Blue is a platform for waste and materials for companies to trade. So here, when it comes to rethinking business models, it's essentially stop looking at a value chain as this incredibly linear, we make something, it goes to our distributor, it goes to our retailer, it goes to the consumer, it goes to the bin, and start thinking about how can we innovate around this. And the example I'm going to give here is actually the packaging industry. And packaging is a huge problem, as Frank mentioned, especially during this time. But just to show kind of like the traditional sort of supply chain of packaging, you have your packaging which is procured by the manufacturer, the product is put in the packaging, this is then dispatched to the retailers sell it to hungry customers are happy, they consume the product, and they throw the packaging away. There's a new startup which was launched last year at the Davos World Economic Forum conference, the Loop Alliance, and this provides products in reusable packaging. The product in reusable packaging is dispatched to retail, and it's sold to hungry customers, and then it is consumed. But rather than going to waste, the packaging is collected, it's washed, and then it's returned to the manufacturer. And here we've found a sort of concept to just eliminate packaging waste through a smart business model. Collaboration is becoming more and more important, and especially when it comes to sustainability, companies working together are far more powerful than companies working alone. You see there's a large amount of alliances that have started to build, where it gets companies to share information, to try and create joint ventures together. Just a few examples, some interesting joint ventures. Enquiry, which is a joint venture between BMW Group and the Alba Group, a waste and recycling sort of company, working together to try and remanufacture parts of cars. We have the Loop TerraCycle Allowance. This is actually an alliance that started with enormous corporate brands like P&G, Unilever, behind this to try and eliminate the concept of packaging waste. We have HEAL, which is a collaboration between Stora Enso, and I'm terrified if I'm going to pronounce this completely incorrectly, but it has several umlauts, the TRA Group, which are Finnish companies, and they're focusing on creating a really healthy built environment. And then even in the healthcare industry, you have the Oncology Data Network, which was started by Pfizer, Merck, Eli Lilly, Amgen, and have, I think, AstraZeneca involved as well. And they wanted to collaborate to create an information sharing platform to improve the results or to measure patients' response to medicines, and so that they could build upon that. Design for the future. So here it's basically thinking about the future. How can you design products to be more standardized so that they could fit across each other, across industry? More modularity, so that you can actually create products that are able to plug and play, across your value chain, across the industry, and not be thrown away. How can we digitize or move for more digitization? The world is going more digital, so should products. User behaviors should also evolve. Also, regulation is changing. Keep up with regulation, and also the reusability of products should be thought more and more when we're looking into creating new products. And finally, unleashing the power of the fourth industrial revolution. In fact, the second and third industrial revolution were very relevant for causing this problem, thanks to this mass production that was only enabled through to being able to unleash the power of fossil fuels in the past and automation creating our production lines. The fourth industrial revolution provides us a whole array of tools, from collecting data with sensors, IoT, cyber-physical systems, and all of that, through to the movement of information, the storage and cloud computing platforms, and also a far improved ability to analyze data using big data analysis, machine learning, quantum computing, etc. Actually, the World Economic Forum quite recently published a really nice report illustrating how the fourth industrial revolution should be harnessed as a tool to enable circular economy, particularly in plastic packaging, consumer electronics. I'm not going to go into details of it, but just to kind of illustrate that you can create better data transparency, very useful in collaborations. You can have more durable design using sort of big data analysis, creation of digital twins, so that you can see what components are within an infrastructure. They could be used very well for the efficient reuse, measuring using IoT, tracking using blockchain, collection and reverse logistics. There's a huge amount that big data, machine learning, AI can do to help improve reverse logistics of dispatching and retrieving products. And you can also optimize sorting processes using sort of machine vision, these sort of recycling plants, for example, or within your manufacturing sites, and all the way through to assembly robots. They have quite a lot more. I don't really have the time to go into all of these. But moving on, we feel that all businesses, whether you're startup, SME, large corporate, you should really be looking into developing circular economy models. We figure there's a few different ways to get into this. The simplest is actually circular operations. There's a large amount of tools that you can do to make your operations more lean, more circular, more sustainable. You can create circular products. Circular products is basically using circular economy to enable your customers through more durable products or reusable products to be more sustainable, whether it's getting rid of packaging waste for them or providing them with something that's biodegradable. We also have the circular enabler. For us, this is the area that's interesting. This is where you don't optimize your operations, you don't provide products, but you enable a wide array of companies across anywhere within your value chain, within your ecosystem, to become circular. So, for example, the Loop enabled a lot of large corporates to provide their products in reusable packaging. That's an example of a great circular enabler. If Adidas, for example, provide their Futurecraft biomaterial to license it out to other manufacturers of shoes, then they become a circular enabler over here too. For us, we see that if you can create something internally, like a circular product or circular operations, you can very likely scale that and move it to become a circular enabler. Before jumping into our sort of design thinking ideation process for circular economy, I'm very happy to, almost skipped a part. I just wanted to very quickly take you through a quick value chain showing kind of like waste across the value chain. So this is just a construction industry built environment, which I'm focusing quite a lot on at the moment. Across every single node of the value chain, we see all kinds of waste. There's energy consumption, wastewater, byproduct, underutilization of assets, and a large amount of landfill. I just wanted to very quickly just share a few exciting sort of startups that we've looked at and we're tracking, or even initiatives that are happening over here. So just very quickly on the raw material side, we have Stora Enso, a very large forestry company that are pushing forward for regenerative forests and making sure that all the forests globally are adopting very good practices to make sure that we don't run out of wood for construction, furniture, and packaging, etc. We have aggregate industry, which are a company that reuse the aggregates that come from demolition waste and put them back into the market. We have Sharebox, which is quite similar to that, gets the sort of demolition waste and puts this back in towards manufacturers to be rebuilt into new sort of materials. Phoenix is a French company, startup level still, that allows distributors to share unsold goods with each other. We have a few companies. Worthlink is quite interesting. It was a government initiative, the Belgian government initiative, with a few companies to create a sort of localized trading platform for equipment, materials in the building industry. Integro is a platform that allows construction companies to procure more sustainable equipment. On the use and maintenance, we have Airbnb and Liquid Space, allowing to share spaces that are already owned by someone, sublet at Liquid Space. Liquid Space is a sublet of unused space to be able to provide space for startups that can't afford their own office space. And then on the sort of demolition disposal side, we have Rubicon Global, which is a great company that helps companies understand what they can do with their waste and be used as a resource. And then finally, on the distribution side, Wastebox.biz and Reconomy are two companies that optimize the collection of construction waste and do sustainable disposal of them. So now I will introduce you properly to Attila. Attila, I had the pleasure of working with him a few years ago, and he really is a veteran when it comes to the circular economy, having been involved with the World Forum Circular Economy Program through to the activities that he's doing now with Pieter Pot, and as a senior advisor to the Fourth Sector Group. So Attila, it'd be great for you to very briefly introduce yourself, and given your vast experience within the circular economy, just provide from you an overview of the evolution of circular innovation over the last decade or so.
Sure. Thank you, Adam. And thank you everyone for joining us today. So as background, I actually hail from public health. I worked a number of years in the UN system in Geneva, and before that in private sector in New York City. And when I joined the World Economic Forum a number of years ago on a public health initiative, we very quickly realized that, and probably very obviously, that everything is interlinked, right? Human health, planet health, it's all connected, and it's all impacted by, everything depends on everything else. And so we very quickly realized that in order to affect human health positively, whether it's in the NCD space, the non-communicable disease space, or the communicable disease space, as we currently see corona, to some extent or another, it will be related to how we behave within the environment that we live in. What we do with our forests, what we do with our water, what we do with our raw materials, how we process them, how we transport them, what we make out of them, how we consume all the things that we make. So very quickly on, it seemed fairly obvious that on a finite planet with finite resources, we can't behave like our resources are infinite. And so the way to close the loop on thinking, closing the loop on that kind of thinking where resources are infinite, we very quickly had to make sure that we reduce the waste around us, and that we reuse and refurbish and repurpose everything that we possibly can. Now, of course, that in the early days had economic questions. I mean, is it economically feasible to do that? And then, of course, also having to think through the energy question and the carbon footprint and all of these questions, which in many cases are still being answered. But at the end of the day, what's obvious is that waste can be reduced through a circular system. What's also obvious is that waste reduction then retains material security, right? So Adam referred to a number of companies that have certain products. If you close the loop on a particular material that could potentially be rare, you're actually making your supply chain safer, right? You're not depending on commodity fluctuations. So that's the 10,000 foot view, right? Very, very high level. And then, of course, there's a huge element of regulation and policy and the role of governments. There's also a huge element of investing in things. A number of years ago, when we were still in early stages of the circular economy acceleration, we asked investors, what if they would invest in circular opportunities? Is that something that would be attractive to them? And quite frankly, most of the time the answer was yes. The issue was that there weren't enough opportunities to invest in. Now, luckily, in the past few years, that's changed, and Adam's mentioned quite a few. There are two that I'm involved with, or was involved with Loop, which is the global circular platform that was launched in Davos 2 years ago. Also in a startup now in the Netherlands, thinking through again circular packaging and how do we come up with the ultimate circular package to continue to help tackle the waste from packaging, which quite frankly is most of the waste that ends up in the ocean is from consumer goods packaging. And so there's still tons of opportunity at every piece of the value chain, as Adam mentioned, from extraction at the beginning to retail at the end. But there's still a lot more to do, and we and obviously Corona didn't help much to accelerate this process in a way. But at the same time, you might see that circular e-commerce platforms are probably benefiting from this. I mean, just imagine and different countries are experiencing different lockdown measures, but during the lockdown where people aren't able to retrieve groceries or anything else, delivering in a circular package is actually quite advantageous, right? So you're almost tackling two problems at the same time. So I'll pause there, and I hope I answered the high level question, Adam. But maybe you can throw a few more specific questions at me.
Yeah. So you were working with Loop at TerraCycle and with the launch of that, and you're one of the co-founders of Pieter Pot at the moment. So I know Loop was with the support of large corporates as well, but from sort of an entrepreneurial perspective, could you just share sort of a few sort of challenges that one faces when coming to sort of launching circular initiatives versus potentially not doing circular and going for traditional business models?
Well, I would even say that being circular or sustainable or socially conscious, even thinking in the social enterprise space is now a competitive advantage in the grand scheme of things, right? If you're just going to launch in a normal business in the normal ways, you're competing with everybody else trying to do something very, very similar with one goal in mind, high returns, right? However, if you're willing to go the circular way or quote unquote the alternative way in the climate that we're currently in, and when I say climate, I literally mean climate change, as well as again, now in the pandemic situation. If you're willing to brave that space and go for the triple bottom line or the triple E, you're actually becoming more competitive, because more and more we've seen also investments going into more impactful efforts, whether startups or scale-ups.
And I suppose one of the very interesting things that you can see from this page that you seem to have alliances and partnerships written everywhere. And by the way, if you ever spend time with Attila, he's probably one of the few people I know that will stop in any city to say hi to people that he randomly bumps into who he knows he has worked with before. But Attila, could you give us some sort of an overview of the importance of collaboration, especially when it comes to designing or working within the realms of circular economy? This seems to be such an important role that you've moved into. It'd be fantastic to hear some thoughts on that.
Sure, and allow me to start with the age-old African proverb: "Go alone, go fast; go together, go far." And that's very, very true for circularity as well. We've seen the innovators go very quickly, very far in the early days, and then hitting a wall and not being able to scale things up. So where I saw a real opportunity, and especially my role at the World Economic Forum, but also within Loop, is if we can fill the needs of multiple stakeholders under one umbrella, where everybody wins, quote unquote, we can have a much bigger impact and also much quicker, right? So again, in alliances, it's really just thinking through what are the different players out there that have the ability and the will to be involved in circularity, but not simply out of goodwill or in this case, wanting to survive and save the planet, more or less, but more about that there's an actual sustainable enterprise opportunity, right? That there's an actual sustainable economic opportunity. So really, the idea of creating strategic alliances is to want to kind of go on a journey together where everybody benefits in the short term and the long term.
And I suppose what can companies do right now? Well, if you're speaking to specific companies, what would you advise right now to think about to be more circular? And what are some sort of instant recommendations that you would provide?
So Adam, I absolutely loved your arrow graph. So I will just advise everyone to put that on their wall. But circularity is not really rocket science, and in fact, before the Second World War, most of the world was still very much circular in many ways. We didn't have single-use disposable items, forks and knives and cups and plates, and none of those things, or even packaging, right? The milkman, that was the whole idea behind Loop in Pieter Pot as well. The milkman for everything, right? For all products. Reuse, refurbish, recycle, that was the norm. So wherever possible, I think companies should really focus on that, right? Reuse, refurbish, and then recycling is quite complex, and it's also geographically dependent on how successful it is. But there are tons of material out there on how to implement circularity within enterprises, right? So there's plenty of good writings and reports and books out there. I think it's more about just doing it. We know how to do it, but for some reason we're not all doing it, right? And that was one of the big challenges we tried to understand at the World Economic Forum as well. It's like, if there are big companies that are doing this successfully, and we know Philips is doing it, and we know Caterpillar are doing it, and Michelin tires are doing it, and really global big companies are doing it, then why isn't really picking up? And I don't know if I have the answer. If I have it, I don't know if I can share it. but that's probably because of, in part, complacency, in part because if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And well, we now see that it is broken, and it will continue to break even more, right? Yeah. So I think that way of thinking that business as usual is just fine until the day comes when it's no longer fine, which is what we've experienced now with Corona, right? So the advice would be, let's stop being reactive and let's become preventive, and this is also from the healthcare background. We know very much that prevention is cheaper and more effective, yet we focus most of our investments into treatment, into acute treatment rather than prevention. So it's kind of the same for the planet, and it's kind of the same for business. The only way you're going to be sustainable is if you take preventive measures and you really think through how do you do things in the most responsible way for your business, as well as for your community, for your stakeholders. And we've heard in Davos this year, it was the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum, stakeholder capitalism, right? That maybe we need to rethink the model that we've mainstreamed, quote unquote, right? And this has been a theme for the past 50 years. When the World Economic Forum started, it started with that principle that we need to move to a system of stakeholder capitalism. We heard 180 CEOs in the US last year sign a declaration to serve all stakeholders, not just shareholders. And this is all wonderful, and the world is really thinking all the right things right now. But now we need to stop saying it, and we need to start doing it. So also rethinking what your business governance is, what your enterprise governance is, right? How do you distribute resources, quote unquote, right? So there are many boxes to be ticked, But I guess in the very short term, and if this pandemic will be the new norm, and it could very well be, maybe there will be another one and another one, and inevitably, why not, if we continue down this path, then maybe start thinking about starting your circular enterprise within basic industries, right? So think food, think healthcare, think waste management, think things like that. And so I think that's probably where the opportunities will be in the near future.
Great. Building on that, Attila, so one of the objectives of this presentation was actually to illustrate a sort of methodology, and I've seen a few questions come up, kind of asking how we could learn more about circular economy, and how we can where we get information and how it operates. So I mean, just to answer that question, there's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is probably the best place to go to learn a lot about it. The World Economic Forum has a huge amount of materials. We're also very happy to have discussions, and we've set up a process which we're not going to go into detail over this session. In our future sort of sessions on circular economy, we'll be covering more of this. But within FoundersLane, we've developed actually a methodology for identifying sort of wastes. It's either can be done within a workshop with a sort of innovation sustainability team, or over a period of several weeks, and getting into far detail. But it's essentially integrating circular economy into a design thinking sort of process, where we sort of identify waste streams. We empathize with who the stakeholders are that might have problems or needs associated to this. We start defining what are the key or most important areas of waste and stakeholder sort of problems that we want to address. And then we use this wide array of different tools that companies like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Circular Economy put together, that we've built on, and created our own sort of tools to go along with it, to come up with new innovative ideas. And like Attila said, and like the arrow graph illustrates, there's an enormous amount of different activities that can be done on the operations, on the product ideation, taking into consideration all the different tools, such as the rethinking business models. We have actually created a database of different business models that can be used for ideation, technologies as well, and ways that you can collaborate and design for the future. The next stage is really just prototyping and testing. I think rather than getting into these details, given we only have 1 minute, probably we could keep the floor open for any more questions for myself or for Attila. I have a question over here. So, question regarding startups in the space and barriers to support proactivity in the space and not reactivity. So on your point on being proactive rather than reactive, how is the space, so I assume circular economy, regulated or dependent on government and policies? I think, Attila, you'd be best positioned to answer this given your work with the World Economic Forum. No pressure.
No worries. I'm actually answering in the chat here David Siska's question. So I'm up to number 3. I'll answer number 4 in a minute. What was the question you asked, Adam?
How is sort of the space regulated? And I suppose is circular economy evolving dependent on governments and policies?
All right, so it's question number 1. Yeah, indeed. So it actually varies by geography. It's very different in Germany and UK and US, right? It will always depend by country. There's no global policy around this. In Europe, we do have the European Commission that has done a lot of thinking and a lot of writing around this. So they have come out with some good knowledge. So definitely look at the European Commission website. Again, look at the country specifics. If you look at Finland, they've done incredibly well. So look up an organization called Citra, S-I-T-R-A, for a lot of learning. Additionally, the Netherlands, quite a lot of insight coming out of here as well. So that's what I would say for question number 1. Yeah.
For question number 2, so this links to that original point at the beginning of the introduction, that circular economy, it's not like blockchain. It's not something that's physical, that's can be explained in one sentence. This is circular economy. It's rather sort of complex and intertwined with so many different moving parts, so many different concepts, tools, different objectives, different strategies. So to your next question, the reason why there weren't enough startups in the space so far, it's because it's all around kind of like noise and momentum. We look at the emergence of kind of like new we almost call them buzzwords. It takes some time for them to pick up and go into the general sort of general population. But a lot of the time, new buzzwords really explain something very physical, very sort of with borders. Circular economy doesn't have any borders, and we're seeing definitions of the concept change in different academics, in different consultancies. I would say that there's a huge amount happening on the area of circular economy. I think a lot of companies don't realize that they're actually circular economy companies. Lots of companies are doing, sort of sharing of assets. They don't realize that they're, proponents to the circular economy. So answer to that is, there is actually quite a lot, but there's no real, it needs to be formalized more, and it needs a formalized version or name of it, needs to spread through past early adopters and through to a sort of larger audience.
One thing I would add to that, Adam, is that I think it's just not been popularized. It's not like you go into Times Square or in London or Berlin and see big giant billboards about circularity, right? It's not in the mainstream media. It's still very much high level, very academic or very sustainability department specific, even in corporates. And I think if we can popularize it, if we can put it into curricula already in unis or even before, just so that people start understanding what it is, by default, why in the world wouldn't you start a circular business if you could, right? It's not, people don't really understand it. They don't know it. We've not done a good job advertising or advocating and teaching the world about it. So that's also a big gap.
Would you agree, maybe, Attila, that we are really at the beginning of the acceleration, maybe perhaps on the knowledge, and that people would understand what it actually means? So, for example, now also that the European Union is so much an advocate of it, that and they're not the only one. And also many of the corporates have now, within their sustainability documents, included this, and within their goals included this. This is coming more and more. What do you think? Do you see that as such?
I think it will continue to evolve and grow. My concern is that, again, we're not teaching the general public. Imagine that if the average consumer knew that the product they're buying is a circular product and they actually knew what circularity meant, that would actually be a competitive advantage, right? But until you educate the public about what circularity is, why in the world would they care about two different products, one is circular and the other? What in the world is circular to the average consumer who's never heard of it? Who cares? It's another stamp on the back of a product that they don't understand. So I think the general public needs to be informed. It's not enough that government and corporate leaders are informed. We literally have to push down to the consumer, because then the consumer starts demanding a circular product. And then, you mentioned blockchain. Imagine a place, and more of these players are popping up, by the way, but transparent supply chains. So if the consumer can, swipe their iPhone over a product in the Tesco or in the Carrefour or whatever, and can tell the entire story of that product, from the packaging, where it came from, who made it, and then from what material, and the contents of that inside of that package, whether, I don't know, let's say chocolate. Imagine you can tell the whole story. Would you buy a product that's telling you the whole story versus a product that isn't telling you the story? Probably not, because now you're curious why the other guy's not telling you the story about their product, right? And this is the 4IR. This is what Adam also mentioned before, the fourth industrial revolution, which I worked quite a bit on at the forum. Imagine integrating the fourth industrial revolution with the circular economy. You have a fully transparent, highly digitized, cleaner, safer, more responsible supply chain, right? From beginning to end. And you're basically making it easy for the consumer to do the right thing. Because currently the argument is, well, the consumer demands low prices. Well, everybody always demands low prices, but that's also something we can think through. And maybe if the better, more responsible stuff becomes mainstream, then the price parity, is there, and there's no longer a question. Why would you buy a bad product if you can buy a good one for the same price, right? So let's remove this whole, because currently we have a Whole Foods, and we have, well, I won't mention anybody who's a lower retailer, not just to be sensitive, but why does it? We don't need to have that kind of exclusivity, right? We literally don't. With this amount of wealth and know-how and technology, we can literally even the scales and give the best products to everybody all of the time. But that's progress, right? And the first movers are doing it, and they're probably going to win. But it's taking too long, and this is where we're thinking, well, then we need to throw more money at it, right? But because it's not a formal thing yet, right? It's still a thing in progress. Investors, might be risk averse into investing in things they don't understand or don't know. So there's just still a lot of that complexity, and it's all because we haven't clearly defined it. We haven't put it in clear rules and regulations. We haven't, made the investors feel more comfortable with it. So there's still so much of that work to be done at the system level. But at the enterprise level, at the startup level, you should absolutely get involved into a circular startup, right? Like there should be no reason for you to not. And ideally, if you can, think about also being a social circular startup, right? Because you can be a very successful, a high revenue generating circular business as well, where you might have some other negative externalities. So I would also welcome this audience to think through, what does it mean for your employees? What does it mean for your supply chain? I mean, look at the whole thing, right? Because if it's rotten somewhere, in the middle or at the beginning even, eventually the rot's going to move up and it's going to bite you in the butt, right? So just start right, start clean, and stay sustainable.
Exactly. This is important, the empathize sort of stage of our process. It's, you're not just focusing on your consumer, you're focusing on a sort of a supply chain, including your employees and everyone. So it's more than just a multi-stakeholder sort of approach for sure. I think just one more question. It mentions that there's approaches to calculating CO2 footprint. Are there ways to calculate circularity? And then assuming if you can measure it, can companies try and differentiate on it? To answer that one quite quickly, Ellen MacArthur Foundation has actually recently published something called Circularitics. It's something like that, Circularitics. And it's actually a tool that encourages companies to measure different parts of their value chain, different activities, and all of that, and how you can measure whether you're circular or not. Would it be something that companies can differentiate on? I think Attila hit the nail on the head. If you're in a shop and a product says we're circular in our operations, regenerative materials, and all of that, and another company doesn't have that same label, consumers might ask, why are you not publishing this information? Absolutely. I think companies that are sustainable already are advertising that they're sustainable. Circularity is just an additional measure to add on to that. I think, given it's 10 past the hour, we'll wrap up over here. And thank you, everyone, for patiently putting through with the introduction to circular economy. We will, in our future sessions, illustrate more on this process of how we can actually put it into action. We also are doing in-house sessions as well, where we can go through this process and give actual tools, including the different kind of almost like cheat sheets for the different activities that one can do when it comes to different solutions and different parts of different supply chains, as well as help with different methodologies for ideating. Attila, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, it's inspiring and a pleasure to hear from you, and hopefully keep on hearing from you in the near future.
Thank you, Adam. Pleasure to be here.